fully mechanical. The word horologia, from the Greek hora, hour, and logein, to tell, was used to describe early mechanical clocks, but the use of this word, still used in several Romance languages, for all timekeepers conceals the true nature of the mechanisms. For example, there is a record that in 1176 Sens Cathedral in France installed an horologe, but the mechanism used is unknown. According to Jocelyn de Brakeland, in 1198 during a fire at the Abbey of St. Edmundsbury, now Bury St. Edmunds, the monks ran to the clock to fetch water, indicating that their water clock had a reservoir large enough to help extinguish the occasional fire. The word clock, via medieval Latin cloca from Old Irish clock, both meaning bell, which gradually supersedes horologe, suggests that it was the sound of bells which also characterized the prototype mechanical clocks that appeared during the 13th century in Europe. In Europe, between 1280 and 1320, there was an increase in the number of references to clocks and horologes in church records, and this probably indicates that a new type of clock mechanism had been devised. Existing clock mechanisms that used water power were being adapted to take their driving power from falling weights. This power was controlled by some form of oscillating mechanism, probably derived from existing bell ringing or alarm devices. This controlled release of power, the escapement, marks the beginning of the true mechanical clock, which differed from the previously mentioned cogwheel clocks. Verge escapement mechanism derived in the surge of true mechanical clocks, which didn't need any kind of fluid power, like water or mercury, to work. These mechanical clocks were intended for two main purposes: for signaling and notification, e.g., the timing of services and public events, and for modeling the solar system. The former purpose is administrative, the latter arises naturally given the scholarly interests in astronomy, science, astrology, and how these subjects integrated with the religious philosophy of the time. The astrolabe was used both by astronomers and astrologers, and it was natural to apply a clockwork drive to the rotating plate to produce a working model of the solar system. Simple clocks intended mainly for notification were installed in towers, and did not always require faces or hands. They would have announced the canonical hours or intervals between set times of prayer. Canonical hours varied in length as the times of sunrise and sunset shifted. The more sophisticated astronomical clocks would have had moving dials or hands, and would have shown the time in various time systems, including Italian hours, canonical hours, and time as measured by astronomers at the time. Both styles of clock started acquiring extravagant features such as automata. Richard of Wallingford pointing to a clock, his gift to St. Albans Abbey. 16th century clock machine Convent of Christ, Tomar, Portugal. In 1283, a large clock was installed at Dunstable Priory in Bedfordshire in southern England. Its location above the rood screen suggests that it was not a water clock. 30. In 1292, Canterbury Cathedral installed a great horologe. Over the next 30 years there are mentions of clocks at a number of ecclesiastical institutions in England, Italy, and France. In 1322, a new clock was installed in Norwich, an expensive replacement for an earlier clock installed in 1273. This had a large, 2 meters, astronomical dial with automata and bells. The costs of the installation included the full-time employment of 2 clock keepers for 2 years. Astronomical. An elaborate water clock, the cosmic engine, was invented by Su Song, a Chinese polymath, designed and constructed in China in 1092. This great astronomical hydromechanical clock tower was about 10 meters high, about 30 feet, and was indirectly powered by a rotating wheel with falling water and liquid mercury, which turned an armillary sphere capable of calculating complex astronomical problems. In Europe, there were the clocks constructed by Richard of Wallingford in Albans by 1336, and by Giovanni da Dondi in Padua from 1348 to 1364. They no longer exist, but detailed descriptions of their design and construction survive, and modern reproductions have been made. They illustrate how quickly the theory of the mechanical clock had been translated into practical constructions, and also that one of the many impulses to their development had been the desire of astronomers to investigate celestial phenomena. The astrarium of Giovanni Dondi dell'Orologio was a complex astronomical clock built between 1348 and 1364 in Padua, Italy, by the doctor and clockmaker Giovanni Dondi dell'Orologio. The astrarium had 7 faces and 107 moving gears. It showed the positions of the Sun, the Moon and the 5 planets then known, as well as religious feast days. The astrarium stood about 1 meter high, and consisted of a 7-sided brass or iron framework resting on 7 decorative paw-shaped feet. The lower section provided a 24-hour dial and a large calendar drum, showing the fixed feasts of the church, the movable feasts, and the position in the zodiac of the moon's ascending node. The upper section contained 7 dials, each about 30 centimeters in diameter, showing the positional data for the primum mobile, Venus, Mercury, the Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. Directly above the 24-hour dial is the dial of the primum mobile, so called because it reproduces the diurnal motion of the stars and the annual motion of the Sun against the background of stars. Each of the planetary dials used complex clockwork to produce reasonably accurate models of the planet's motion. These agreed reasonably well both with Ptolemaic theory and with observations. Wallingford's clock had a large astrolabe-type dial, showing the Sun, the Moon's age, phase, and node, a star map, and possibly the planets. In addition, it had a wheel of fortune and an indicator of the state of the tide at London Bridge. Bells rang every hour, the number of strokes indicating the time. Dondi's clock was a 7-sided construction, 1 meter high, with dials showing the time of day, including minutes, the motions of all the known planets, an automatic calendar of fixed and movable feasts, and an eclipse prediction hand rotating once every 18 years. It is not known how accurate or reliable these clocks would have been. They were probably adjusted manually every day to compensate for errors caused by wear and imprecise manufacture. Water clocks are sometimes still used today, and can be examined in places such as ancient castles and museums. The Salisbury Cathedral clock, built in 1386, is considered to be the world's oldest surviving mechanical clock that strikes the hours.